If you want some FIFA 23 coins, please check out MMOXP.com. Their link is down in the description. They're fast, cheap and reliable, and if you use code REMA you can get yourself a 5% discount. So what's going on, guys? My name's Ash and welcome back to a brand new video. Now when it comes to FIFA, one of the hot topics on the internet is always custom tactics, player instructions and formations that people are using, usually pros, because people want to try and get those results. But it's important you guys understand that tactics aren't some magic formula. Just copying a pro's tactics won't make you as good as a pro, because those tactics are accustomed to what the pro wants to play like, so it might not work for you. Now I post custom tactics videos on the internet, but I always take the time to explain why I use the settings that I use and how I go about creating those tactics, because it's important that if people want to use those tactics, they understand how to use the tactics. You know, just copying somebody's tactics and then trying to play like you normally do isn't going to work, because those tactics are designed for a different play style. So in this video we're going to break it down into different parts. We're going to talk about how to choose the players for your team, how to pick the formation you should use, how to pick your custom tactics, and the player instructions to fit your own play style. So before you change any settings, before you try and choose some custom tactics instructions, you need to have an idea of how you play. And the best way of doing that is to just play as you normally do and record the gameplay, whether it be on the PlayStation capture, the Xbox capture, through a capture card. Just get that footage so you can watch it back and analyze it. The things you should be looking out for are, do you like to build up the play very quickly? Do you like to play direct passes straight through the middle? Do you like to play a lot of short passes? Do you like to play out wide? Do you like to press up high, or do you prefer to drop off? Basically, break down every small aspect of your game so you get an understanding of the type of player that you are. Now, when you've got an idea of how you like to play, it's time to identify a formation that you will be happy to play with that will suit your play style. And in order to do that, you need to understand how the different formations work in FIFA. Now, if any of you are like me, when I first identified how I like to play, I'll define it as a balanced style. Sometimes I like to play short, fast passes. Other times I like to play a more direct approach. Sometimes I like to ping an over the top through ball, and other times I like my striker to come short. So what I did was I looked at the formations in the game, and by far the most balanced one will always be the 4-2-3-1 narrow. This is because the 4-2-3-1 is structured in a way where you can play many different styles with it. For example, when you are wanting to be more defensive, you have those 4 defenders, the 2 CDMs and the 3 attacking midfielders to cover your goal. You also have the striker sitting just in front. When you go forward, you also have those same 5 midfielders, you have the striker, and if you want to, you have the fullbacks. There is a constant balance with this formation. You can also play very narrow with it because of the positioning of the 3 cams, and you can also play wide because there are 3 of them. You can drag them out wider if you want to. So what I'm saying is the 4-2-3-1 has the most balanced style. So I knew when I identified my playstyle, the 4-2-3-1 would probably be my most comfortable formation to use. If my playstyle revolved around very fast build-up, I'd probably use something like a 4-1-2-1-2, because that diamond is structured in a way where you can string passes together very quickly and create very quick attacks. If I noticed I like to utilize crosses and play down the wing a lot, I'd probably use a formation with wingers like the 4-3-3, because it suits my style the best. The one that most people use in FIFA 23 is the 4-2-2, because it allows you to always have 6 players back, keep 4 attackers forward, and you can just ping one driven pass and you're basically on your opponent's final third. And the reason a lot of people use the 4-2-2 is because the mechanics in FIFA 23 lean towards that formation. The formation is the best at abusing those mechanics. Now, when you've picked your formation, it's important that you pick players that work well in that formation, because otherwise it'd be like filling a petrol car up with diesel. The car is great and diesel's great, but they're just not compatible, meaning it won't work. So as I've identified, the play style I have is a very balanced style. I like to switch up my play a lot, and the formation I've decided on using is the 4-2-3-1. So I had to pick my team to fit that formation primarily. So let's take a look at this real quick. I've got Ronaldo as my striker. That's because Ronaldo's got a high-low work rate, which means he's more focused on attacking. He's also got very good shooting. He's got the 5-star skills. He's got the height. He's got the jumping. Basically, he is the complete striker that you need in in this formation because there is only one of them. You know, using a player that only specializes in one thing in a one striker formation isn't always the best, so I went for a very well-rounded player. Now for my 3 cams, I've gone for Diogo Jota, Chiesa and Rafael Leao. Now I have Leao on the left hand side because he's got great pace, great dribbling, great shooting with a finisher, decent physical, and obviously he's got, you know, basically the perfect balanced stats for a left attacking midfielder. Similarly on the right hand side we've got Chiesa, who is a high medium. He's got 93 pace, great dribbling, great shooting, great stamina, basically again a perfect right attacking midfielder, because in these wider positions you need those more technical players. You need players that are quick, good on the ball, have the ability to pass and can also shoot. Now for my central cam I use somebody that is actually very cheap, and it's because he actually fits this system better than a lot of expensive players would. And the reason we've gone for Diogo Jota is because he's got that 5-star weak foot, which means he can go on his left foot or his right foot. He's got the high work rates, which means he's very good at getting into those attacking positions, and when you are defending he also gets into the correct position as well, which gives you the perfect transitions. He also has a pretty balanced card where he's got good pace, good shooting, decent dribbling stats and decent physical stats, so it makes him the perfect cam. The only thing that you could argue is lacking with Jota is the passing stat, but I really don't think it's that important in FIFA 23 because I think passing is pretty random anyway, so I focus primarily on dribbling, pace and shooting, and the 5-star weak foot as well as the work rates. Now for my 2 CDMs that will play in the 4-2-3-1, I went for one player that is more technical. So this is Renato Sanchez. He's a high work rate, which means he can attack and defend, which is important when we get to the custom tactics and instructions. He's got the 4-star, which means he's more than capable of dribbling and passing on either foot. He's got good pace, good dribbling, okay shooting, okay passing, okay defending with a shadow and great physical. He also has very good stamina as well as the good traits that you need in this game, for example the outside foot shot trait. My other CDM is more of a defensive midfielder, so this is Patrick Vieira. You know, he's got great defensive stats, great physical, he's very tall and he fits that more defensive role perfectly. So it's important to identify the types of players that you want to use in these midfield positions. I typically go for one more attacking minded or at least one more box to box player and a more defensive player alongside him because it gives me another good balance. Now when it comes to my fullbacks, because I like my players to be good on the ball as well as being able to defend, I went for players like Hernandez and Hakimi because they've got good attacking stats as well as having good defensive stats. Now you could argue using somebody like Kyle Walker would be better because they are better at defending, but ask yourself this: if you play a more attacking playstyle or a more balanced playstyle where you need your fullbacks to contribute on the ball or you want to play out from the back, you need those players to have that ability to do that. Using a clunky player like Walker actually hinders your playstyle because they're not able to do what you need them to do. So identifying the types of fullbacks you want to use is very important. So I usually go for players that are good on the ball in the fullback positions. Now your 2 centre backs are pretty much always the same. They need to be full meta, they need to be quick, and they need to just have the perfect animations basically. Kimpembe's not that great, but Varane is. You know, these are 2 very good centre backs. You don't want to be using somebody that's slow in the centre back position because you'll just be holding yourself back all the time. Keeper is pretty much down to preference. I just use Chesney because he's good for chemistry. So now we've picked the team, we've got the formation, we need to start thinking about the tactics that we are going to use in the game. So these are the custom tactics that I use, but they might not be the tactics that you would want to use in a 4-2-3-1. So again, I'm going to break down why I use what I use and why somebody might use something different to me. So my defensive style revolves around me pressing when I want to press and dropping off when I want to drop off. So I like to use a balanced defensive style because I don't want to be constantly pressing. I want to have more control. So using balanced makes more sense for me. Even though pressure tactics are very broken in this game, they're very good, I don't like using them because they don't suit my style. So I don't use them even though they are good. Balance works very well for me. Somebody that likes to drop back all the time, they're not going to use press after possession loss, for example. They'll be better off using using something like drop back because they are constantly able to drop back, and that suits their system more. Similarly, if you always want to pressure your opponent, you're going to use one of the pressure tactics because it makes sense. Now, defensive width always depends on the formation that you are using and the way you intend to use it. So like I said, the 4-2-3-1 narrow has the very unique ability to be very wide and narrow at the same time. When you are defending, you have to understand that people primarily like to play down the middle of the pitch, so having a lower width usually works very well. The reason I have it on 42 specifically is because it covers the middle of the pitch, you know, most of the time, but when somebody does want to go down the wings, we also have just enough width to cover that area. So it actually balances out the defensive width because we can defend wide and we can also defend narrow the majority of the time. Now, defensive depth, I actually meant to lower this down, and this is something I've just changed now because I think it's important to do that. Now, I had this on 65 before the patch because, like I said, people weren't that quick in this game. Lengthy players were, but explosive players and control players weren't. So you could get away with having a very high depth because your defenders would usually catch up the attacker even if they got through on goal. This isn't the case now, so it's important to lower that defensive line. So I'm actually going for something more like 57 because it works better with the current state of the game. Having that lower line allows you to defend through balls a lot better because you're not constantly going to get caught out with them. It also isn't so far back that you're always under pressure, so it gives me that nice balance where I can still press my opponent nice and high, but they can't always just play that through ball in behind either. So understanding which depth you want to use is very important, you know. You're not also really going to want to use something like drop back with a very high depth because that contradicts what you want to do. You're not going to want to have a very high defensive line and then drop back because that doesn't really make any sense. If you drop back, you drop back. So make sure your depth complements your defensive style. Now, when it comes to your attacking tactics, I said I like to play a balanced style, but I still use fast build-up. And the reason for this is because it still gives your players better movement. Although it says fast build-up, you don't always have to utilize this. It just means your players move around a lot quicker to open up passing opportunities. So I then have the ability to play slower if I want to, or play quickly if I want to. If I have it on balanced, they don't really move around as much, so I can't play very quickly if I want to. But on fast build-up, I can still play pretty slowly if I want to, so it just makes more sense to use. Now, for chance creation, I always suggest direct passing, but again, some people might not like this. But the reason I like it is because if you look at the diagram in the bottom right hand corner, you get the best movement out of your attacking players. If you look at the white dots, they are the attacking team, and you can see they're always dynamically moving around to create passing opportunities to end up scoring. But if you look at something like balance, they move around in a very static motion. It's very difficult to create any sort of chance with this because there's just not enough movement. Now, some people like to keep possession of the ball, so they might even use possession, but again, not very effective for creating chances because although they move around, they don't move around in the right areas to break down your opponent. Some people like to play constant through balls, so forward runs might make sense for them because their players are always constantly running forward, but again, I don't like that because I like a more balanced style. Direct passing just gives you the best overall movement, which is why I use it. And again, it's quite balanced, which is very important with the system that I am using. Now, for offensive width, like I said, the 4-2-3-1 narrow is quite a narrow formation, so it makes sense that you want to attack quite narrowly. Now, the reason I have my attacking width on 37 only is because it's a lot easier for me to link up the play with shorter passes, and I can still play the long passes if I want to. It puts my players closer together, so it is easier to link up the play when I need to do it. I also think it's better to have your width on a more narrow setting because it's easier to manually drag your players out wide than it is to drag them in narrowly. So it makes sense to have them on a more narrow setting, and if you want them to go wider, you can do that manually, which is why I do that. Now, for the players in box, this one's always down to preference. If you're one of these players which always likes having as many people in the box as you want, it's good to have it on a very high setting, but you also have to bear in mind that this will leave you vulnerable to counterattacks because that's the sacrifice you're making in the hopes to score more goals. Similarly, some people don't like taking risks, so they have it lower. They don't have as many people in the box, but when they lose the ball, they're not going to get countered as easily. I like to go for something in the middle because I like to commit some men forward, but I also like to be, defensively sound when I lose the ball. So I have it on about 6 or 7, depending on the type of mood I'm in, but I usually leave it on 6 because it's quite balanced. Corners and free kicks are exactly the same. I like to have a few men in the box to cross to, but I also like having people back so I can defend it if my players lose the ball. But again, it's down to preference. It's down to what you want to use. Just because somebody says to use 4 doesn't mean you should use 4, because you might not like crossing the ball in that way, so choose what you want to use. Now, obviously, when you've got your custom tactics that you want to use, it's important to get the instructions in, and these are also very important. I would argue they're more important than the custom tactics that you use, because these are the instructions that you give your players, and this is how they will actually play in the game. So when we look at my striker, for example, Ronaldo, I used to have him on balance width, and I just had him on mixed attack. I didn't put him on any specific settings, and I noticed when I was playing with him, sometimes he would drift too far off into the wing, so I would never have that striker in position to finish off the chances because he'd be on the wings or he'd be out of position. So I thought, you know what, let's make him stay central so he's always in those positions, and that works better for me. Similarly, I also had him on mixed attack, but I noticed he doesn't make enough runs in behind, so I put him on getting behind now, and he makes a lot more runs. If I want him to come short, I can tell him to come short with R1. So again, this setting makes sense for me. I also tried him out on stay forward, but I noticed he was very disconnected from the rest of my team, so I ended up just putting him on basic defensive support so he would stay closer to the rest of my team and he wasn't too disconnected from the overall game. Now, on my wide cams, I've experimented with many different settings, varying from stay forward to come back on defense, and now I just settle on basic defensive support. Now, originally, I tried putting them on stay forward because I knew driven passes and through balls were very good in this game, so I would constantly have like 4 people up top when I got the ball back, and I could just ping it up to them. But what I noticed was there wasn't enough of a transition from defense to attack, and when somebody was marking those passes, it was very difficult to get out from defense up to attack. So I was like, you know what? I need these on basic defensive support so there is a more natural transition so I can carry the ball from defense to the attack. Otherwise, there is just a massive gap between defense and attack, and it doesn't work too well. Now, I also have them on get into the box for cross, and this isn't because I like to cross the ball. The reason I did this was because I noticed when they were on basic or balanced crossing runs, they were always sitting on the edge of the box. They weren't getting involved when we got into those dangerous areas. So when I put them on get into the box for cross, it made them start running into the box so they would be there to finish opportunities when the chances arose. So, even though I don't like crossing the ball, it still makes them get into those positions in the box where they are useful. Otherwise, they're just pretty irrelevant when you are attacking most of the time. Now, again, with my central cam, I've experimented with come back on defense, basic defensive support, and I've settled on stay forward. Now, the reason I did this was because, like I said, Diogo Jota is a high player. This means he has a high attacking work rate and a high defensive work rate. When I had him on basic defensive support, I noticed he was getting too into the defensive action, because of that high defensive work rate, he would basically always come back and he would never be up when I needed to attack. So I put him on stay forward because this actually counteracts his high defensive work rate, and it actually works very nicely because he will transition into defense when you need him to, but at the same time he doesn't come too far back because he is on that stay forward setting. So understanding your instructions and the work rates that you've got on your players is very important because they go hand in hand. Now, like I said, with my midfielders, my 2 CDMs, I like to have a balance with them. I like to have one more attacking CDM and one more defensive CDM. So I've got Renato Sanchez as a more attacking CDM because his playstyle suits that, and Vieira as a more defensive CDM because, again, his playstyle also suits that. So on my more attacking CDM, I have him on the settings just cover center, and I leave everything alone because I don't just want this guy to defend, He's got the high attacking work rate, he's got the high defensive work rate, which means he is capable of attacking and defending. He's not going to be caught out of position a lot because his card is built for that type of style. He's a box-to-box player. If he was like a medium-high player and you had him on balanced attack, he wouldn't really contribute to the attack anyway, and he wouldn't be a great box-to-box because they just don't get that involved. The reason I have him on cover center is, again, because a lot of people like to play through the middle in this game. So it's important that when these players are defending, they are there in the middle to break up those passes. And if you look at the wide players, so I've got Chiesa and Hakimi, Leao and Hernandez. They are already covering those wings. I don't need my CDM to cover that area because there's already 2 players there. I need him to cover the middle of the pitch, which is why we have him on the cover centre setting. Similarly, with my left CDM, the more defensive one, I have him on stay back while attacking cover centre because again, he's not very good at attacking, so I don't need him to attack. He's a more defensive player, so we tell him to stay back while attacking. We also need him to do the same thing as Renato when it comes to breaking up the play, so we have him on cover centre because again, we don't need him to cover that wing area because we've already got Leao and Hernandez to do that. So it makes more sense that he is in the middle when we are defending. Now when it comes to my fullbacks, like I said, I have players that are good on the ball, so they can contribute to the attack. And this is where you're going to see the balance thing come into play yet again. So I have Theo Hernandez just on like basic defensive settings. I have him on balance, normal, mixed, stick to position. You know, I don't like to change him because I don't like to limit what he can do. I like him to defend and I like him to attack because it gives me the extra width in this formation. As I showed you in my custom tactics, we have an attacking width of 37, which means we can be very narrow at times. So it actually helps having somebody like Hernandez, who is a left back, to give you that extra width when you were going forward because it makes up for the narrow style, right? But if we look at my other fullback, Hakimi, I have him on stay back while attacking, and this helps with the balance. If I have them on both attacking, if they're both attacking, Hernandez and Hakimi, sometimes we'll get caught out too much because there are too many men committing forward. So what I like to do is keep Hakimi on stay back, so we always have at least 3 defenders back. We also have Patrick Vieira staying back, so we have 4 players back. That is the bare minimum. And the high work rates of, let's say, Jota and Sanchez means when we lose the ball, those players quickly come back as well. So it gives me a very nice balance. Just because I've got him on stay back while attacking, it doesn't mean I can't attack with him. I can still trigger a run, but it just means by default, this guy stays back, so we've got a more balanced system. Now, another bit of advice that I'm going to give you guys is having multiple options when you are struggling in a game. So sometimes I'll switch to a 4-3-3 because that is a wider formation compared to, let's say, the 4-2-3-1. And my custom tactics are pretty similar, right? I still have the same width, the same depth pretty much. I switch fast build up to balance just because I feel like it's easier to link up play in a 4-3-3 because sometimes if you have like fast build up, your players will just move too quickly for the formation to work properly. That's just what I've noticed, but I just have it on balance with a 4-3-3. Obviously, I keep direct passing on because it's the only one that gives you the right movement. Width, I have this higher than I would in a 4-2-3-1, obviously, because it's a wider formation, and pretty much the same for players in box, corners, and free kicks. But the important part is if you look at my team, these players can also play in this formation. So the front 3 of Leao, Ronaldo, and Chiesa, they're all attacking players. Chiesa can play right wing, Leao can play left wing, and Ronaldo can play striker because they all have the attributes able to do that, right? And if you look at my 3 midfielders, Renato Sanchez is still a box-to-box midfielder. That works perfectly. Vieira is still a good CDM like he would be in a 4-2-3-1. And Jota is actually a great centre mid in this formation. And the reason for it is, like I said, his high work rate allows him to attack and defend. So even though his defensive stats aren't great, it still allows him to be effective in that position. And this works very well because his attacking stats aren't that great at this point in the game, but as a midfielder, he's actually okay. Obviously the fullbacks and centre backs are exactly the same, but the main point I'm trying to make to you guys is if you can make a good team, if you know you have a good team, if you know they can play multiple different systems, that's what I'm trying to say. So if one system isn't working in a certain situation, you can just switch to another one, no problem. I find that very important and it's a very underrated tip, guys. But yeah, that is just a video on how I went about choosing my formation, the team that I use, as well as my tactics and instructions. And if you guys have enjoyed it or found it useful, I'd very much appreciate it if you could drop it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you are new so you never miss out on any videos like this one. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you are notified when a video is posted. And with all that aside, guys, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day and I will catch you all later. Peace.